Hello. Howdy, everyone. Can the people in the room hear us okay? Just kidding. Just kidding. Hopefully y'all can hear us. Well, howdy, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming here today. We're so happy to have you all out to the wilderness for our Concentrating on Concentrates class. For those who don't know, my name is Tanner Barris. I'm the president of Minnesota Cannabis College. Been with the organization for about 3 years. I'm going on 4 years now. I'm really excited to be able to start turning towards our adult use market that we're having come online here. Today's class is focusing on something that is of particular interest to me. I discovered concentrates way back in 2014, back when some guy I was buying weed from handed me some oil on a piece of parchment paper and said, "This is going to change your world." And I went, "Yeah, sure, I'll take it," and sort of moved on. But really has evolved and grown and become sort of my main method of consuming cannabis. What I'm really excited about today is that there was a lot legalized here in Minnesota. We're going to be talking about some of that today. But one of the things that was legalized is our own home processing. We all can be making high quality cannabis products at home, not just growing them. Yes, that's allowed, but also everything beyond that. And that's what today we'll be focusing on today. Now, we've got some people that really are experts in this. I told Steve I wanted to host this class, and we were like, cool. And we went, oh, shit, but we need people to teach it. Because this is something that I'm not an expert in, that Steve is not an expert in, but we have people here that are experts. So we're going to be introducing them in just a couple of minutes here, but sort of this is an agenda of what we got going on today. We're going to do a brief preview into what is processing and what are the laws around that. After we get all the fun stuff out of the way, we're really going to jump into what is processing. John from Minnesota Solventless is going to be sort of leading stuff on. And then afterwards, we're going to be hearing from Stefan with Cornell talking about pressing cannabis flower. So there's a lot of different types of rosin. We're going to be talking about what those are today. And then finally, we're going to end out with a Q&A panel with those two. Then, of course, Casey with Minnesota Grown CBD as well. These are really some people that, I'll be honest, make some of the best oil here in the state of Minnesota. So I'm really excited they're leading our class here today. And then, of course, the reason that you all are here is not just to hear us talk. That's, of course, exciting. But the reason that you're here is for our rosin lab that we'll be going to afterwards. So in about 45 minutes here, we'll be moving on to there. If you brought flower here today, of course, we encourage you to try pressing that. We've got the experts here that will help you through that. If you don't have flower, no sweat. We do have some CBD flower here, courtesy of Cornell, that you can get. So we're really looking forward to that. But first, should we talk about some laws? Okay, so I want to give my usual disclaimer that I am not a lawyer. So this is not me providing legal guidance to you. This is me explaining what the statute says around cannabis processing. There's still a lot that I think is waiting for guidance from the state of Minnesota's Office of Cannabis Management whenever they decide to start putting that out on how exactly this will look. But this is what we know as of today. So hopefully you guys got the memo. You're not supposed to have more than 2 ounces of flower. We're not going to be weighing it, but in theory, that's the maximum that you're allowed to be having out in public. So that's sort of what we're going to be focusing on today. But concentrates, how much are you allowed to have around that? Well, the state of Minnesota put a limit on 8 grams of concentrate. If you are a new user of concentrates, that probably seems like a lot. If you are a regular user of concentrates, you probably know it's really not that much. And so we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the changes that we hope come up in Minnesota law in the future. But as of right now, that 8 grams is that maximum you can have. And then some people don't know this, but there is also a limit on the amount of edibles you can have. 800 milligrams of THC per edibles. You know, if you walk into a store, that's definitely a lot of product you're buying. But if you're making edibles at home, it's really easy to get to that 800 limit and then above that. So if you're bringing products to other people, if you're making brownies and sharing them with your friends and family, a great thing to bring if you get together for the holidays. Just make sure you don't have more than 800 milligrams. And then finally, one of the things that we're super excited about is that, well, there is that 2 ounce limit when you have cannabis outside of your home. When you are at home, each adult is able to possess up to 2 pounds of cannabis. So that really increases the amount that you're able to process inside of your own home. Of course, if you're going somewhere else to a processing lab, you're unfortunately limited on that. But what's really exciting is if you and one other person live in your residence, you can be processing 4 pounds of cannabis at a single time. Now, I'm not going to talk about the concentrate that comes out from that because that's definitely more than 8 grams. But regardless, 2 pounds is sort of that maximum per adult. So yeah, like I said, a lot of changes that need to come up in laws because that 2 pounds will easily put you above 8 grams unless you're doing something really wrong. And then finally, the last thing that I want to talk about is that sale of cannabis is prohibited. sure this is something that we all know, but just if you're here today and you press something and you think, hey, this is really, really good, and you want to share it with someone, we're super fine with that. Please just don't be selling it. That's sort of the rule. And then one thing that I want to jump back up to is that thing on the top, volatile solvents prohibited. So we are not allowed to be blasting cannabis in our homes, meaning using like butane, ethanol, another volatile solvent that could potentially combust, could potentially explode, can be sort of dangerous. So state of Minnesota limited it on just that solventless methods. So you can use water, you can use heat, you can use pressure, can't use alcohol, can't use ethanol, can't use butane. So that's sort of the disclaimers that I wanted to give you all ahead of time. Yep, so that's the fun part. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, we're gonna jump to what you all are actually here for, which is processing. So for that, I'm gonna be handing it off to the people that know far more than I do, starting with our buddy John from Minnesota Solventless. So John, I'll pass this on over to you.
Thanks for coming out, everybody. We're excited to have you and hope you guys get to walk away with some really powerful knowledge, be able to take it back to your grows and really transform what you're going to do over the next few months. So thank you for coming out. What is processing? Basically, it's breaking down your existing cannabis flower into another form for ingestion or use, whether you're going to make edibles, decarb it in the oven just as flour, or if you're going to turn it into rosin or some sort of extract. It's basically breaking it down from the raw plant into another ingestible form. There's many ways to do it, from solvents to solventless. And sometimes, like I said, just throwing it back in the oven and doing a decarb on your flour. So it's pretty basic. There's not a bunch that goes into it, but as far as processing goes, it's pretty simple. All right, edibles. So we'll talk about in these times and temps, they work with either cannabis flower or when we extract into rosin. You'll be working with a little bit higher temp than maybe if we're going to go with a cart. So I just want to get that out there, kind of pay attention to the times, excuse me, the times and temps that are going to be on the screen up here. For edibles, I really like doing it a little bit faster. And so I crank up my temps a little bit higher. I do about 220, 235, and that's about a 45-minute decarb. What you're doing is taking the THCA from the extract. Whenever you press it out, you're really high in THCA, and you're converting that to D9 THC. That's the active ingredient. That's what's really going to get everybody their effects as far as the off the gate. And we can talk about full spectrum and everything later on, but you want to decarb it. Pay attention to the physical transformations that are going to occur. You're going to see it start as a nice waxy substance, and then you're going to see bubbles start to form. It's going to become very volatile inside there, and then it'll start to subside and calm down. Once you see no to minimal micro bubbles inside there, that's generally the best time to pull it. Anytime after that, you're not converting a ton, and you're going to start to boil or burn your rosin inside of the jar. So pay attention to it, stick around the oven, try to work in a fairly efficient method so that it's not causing any harm to your material. Once it's done bubbling, once it's calmed down, pull it out, let it cool off. That's a big thing a lot of people want to do, is just crack it open and smell it, because it's going to be very terpy. You'll get a real good sniff off it, I guess. But you want to let that cool all the way down, so you don't off gas all of those good terpenes inside there and let them go. You want that to go back into the edible. That really helps with your entourage effect and the real go.
You're describing decarbing. This is taking the fresh press and doing like a first operation on that?
Yeah, and it can also be done with just raw cannabis flower. So dried cannabis flower thrown on a baking tray in the oven. It's very similar. When we're talking about the bubbles and looking for transformation, we're going to talk specific into rosin. And it can be fresh press, it can be cured, first press, really high quality, or it can be third and fourth press, food grade material. Decarbing and having the edible route is very versatile, because if you have an accident from the grow or through the processing, you can save it in the food grade steps. So it's just a good backup plan, really, something that we like to have. So yeah, cool it down. don't let the terps off gas. You want to keep all of that in for effect and flavor. But once it's cooled down, slightly warming it up through your cooking, just be efficient in where you introduce it in your recipe. I wouldn't put that as my first ingredient and then cook for the next 30 minutes on the stove. I would try to have that into a spot where it's right before the cool down phase so that you're not gonna keep cooking the rosin, off gassing anything inside. So be mindful of your recipe and where you can introduce that at, and that should help you quite a bit.
On dosage, so milligrams.
Sure.
You're doing like rosin, is there a range that?
Yeah, there's absolutely a range. So what I see most commonly from, we'll talk specific on a fresh frozen, very, maybe like a early to on time chop, somewhere where you're pulling down with a cloudy resin gland, not full amber. If we're in there, that's gonna, I lost my train of thought a little bit, I'll be honest with you guys. Rephrase it again, my bad. Oh, perfect. I'm sorry. Fresher material, a little bit more live, a little bit lower percent. When I see aged or full term material, I'll see a little bit higher percent. The percent range is around 60 to 80. I haven't really seen anything that's crested over 80, and the highest one I've seen tested that I've ran has been 79. And so that was dried, aged, old material. So around a 60 to 80% per gram is kind of.
70%.
You'll be ballparking for sure. Yeah, you'll be somewhere in there.
You can get some variance between hash, if you're pressing hash initially versus flour rosin. Flour rosin's gonna have a little bit more contaminant to it. So that'll add to the mass of it and then reduce the overall percentage on there. So 60 to 70 is usually good in the flour. Could go higher with hash, probably, I would say.
Perfect. Yeah. Good. Cool. Yeah. Everybody good on edibles? Everybody all kosher? No hands? Cool. Dry sifting. So this one's actually kind of fun, and it's another let's save the waste step. So if you're gonna dry your flour, if you're gonna trim everything up at the end of your run, dry sifting your trim is very common. A lot of people will trim over a trim bin. It generally has like a 220 micron screen. It's larger holes, so it lets a lot of contaminants through as well. But it's also capitalizing on those trichomes and resin glands that are falling off the plant as you're snipping, cutting around, and handling the bud. So being able to recollect that, we call that dry sift, or if we take it a step further to a little bit cleaner dry sift, we can actually work it with screens. They have tension nylon screens, and you'll put your material on top, you'll rub it around, and you actually sift it by hand and work your material, your resin glands, through the screens all the way to the bottom. You're not using any water, so you don't need to dry anything. My general process is bubble hash, and so I'm always water. I always have to dry. It takes more time. If people are dry sifting, as soon as you're done collecting, you can immediately put that in a bag and throw it on your press, and now you can create your rosin. So it's a great way to use your trim, leftover trim, but people will also do it if they have small batch flour and they just want to press, same day or after they're dry. They go, oh, well, maybe it doesn't look that pretty. It's not going to turn out. And let's sift it. And so it's generally a clean way to repurpose your dry material. Let's see, perfect. The micron screens. So if we look at kind of our stack, we'd have this small number. Small number means a small hole, and that's going to be at the bottom. That larger 250 up at top, that's a big giant hole, but it's blocking sticks and stems, right? So as we work our way down, this is where we're going to see our varying grades of hash. You're going to start finding your premium grades around the 73s, the 90s, the 120s. Outdoor, you can start seeing 120s to 160s. You'll see a little bit bigger shift. Indoor, you generally stay on the 120 side and 73 side. It's just Mother Nature does it better outside. That's just with the resin gland size. So we won't start any debates or anything crazy, but trying to pay attention to those shifts, I guess, is kind of important as well. But really focusing on having a correct stack in there so that you don't have too many screens and you're pulling 1 gram, 1 gram, 1 gram, trying to make it efficient. So I can look for this range that's really going to help me. And I see that my material is consistently pulling at 73 to 120. And then that kind of tells you you're in the ballpark, you can keep running this, or maybe that's something that you discard and you'd look for a new strain to run next time. So understanding your varying levels, your micron grades, it'll help you kind of hone in on a quality aspect. We do run, we'll say mixed micron, where we'll start skipping screens. And so we might go 250 to filter out the sticks and stems, a 160 on top, all the way down to a 45 or a 25. And that's just catching everything that's in there. Generally, that's a lot of food grade stuff, maybe carts. It's not going to be your creme de la creme in a gram jar. So there's, you kind of mix and match as you see fit for your operation, your material, your strain, your run. So I think we're good there, because if we're going to double up on a bunch of stuff in bubble hash, so I'm not trying to, I don't want to get too, yeah, here we go. So bubble hash, it's similar to dry sifting as far as the screens go. We're paying attention to our micron size. However, we're using loose nylon bags instead. There is vibratory sieves out there with stainless steel screens, but that's less a home use. So you traditionally would be in bubble bags, but bubble hash, you're starting with your plant material, you're starting with ice water, and you're agitating, and you're trying to remove the resin gland off of the trichome. We're looking for a specific resin gland. It's the capitate, or excuse me, a specific trichome. It's the capitate trichome, where it kind of looks like this mic. It's got a big old fat ball on top, and that's where the resin's located. We don't want any of the stem. We don't want any of the plant material underneath. We're just trying to extract this resin gland. So that's why we use cold temperatures. We freeze everything. We get it down to a solid state to where it can fracture off. A lot of the tips, they're kind of a weak neck style trichome, where they pinch in a little bit and they'll generally fall off very easy. And now they're in the water floating around. So we have all of this material, all of the hash, plant material, ice cubes, cold water in there, and we start pouring it through our bags. Now what you see here is all of these resin glands that are starting to get caught and filtered. What we do is we'll take and dry that after, collect it, and you can either air dry or you can go through a freeze dryer. The freeze dryer method is a little bit more costly up front, but it can help you maintain some very nice quality without having to put a ton of effort into it. Air drying is a really great method. People kick out some top quality material with that. It takes a little bit more time, and you need to be very attentive with how you're handling it. You'll be alternating between your freezer, a little coffee filter, and a desk fan on top of a tabletop. It's a little bit more finicky, but there's a few guys in the state right now that are kicking out some really insane air dry bubble hash. And it's very fruitful and rewarding. It takes less electricity, it takes less cost up front. And so people really gravitate towards trying to hone in on that process. The freeze dryer, that's pretty easy. It's plug and play. It pulls your temperature down to about -40. You turn your shelf temps on to about 10 degrees, and you get a negative vacuum on this chamber. And this chamber, it creates sublimation or similar to sublimation. It's actually using a little heat to evaporate underneath, but that's what's drying your hash out. You're doing it at such low temperatures that everything remains frozen and only the water is escaping off of there. That's how you can help keep your fresh frozen. Maybe we should back up and talk about that. So fresh frozen versus dried. Fresh frozen material. If you ever hear the term live rosin, live resin, it's generally referring to, or should be referring to, fresh frozen plant material, where it's growing on the stem and I'm chopping it off the stem. I'm removing all of the buds. Get the fan leaves out of the way. You don't need any of those, but don't trim your sugar leaves. No going through and cutting everything up. You're going to be just snipping buds into a bag, and you're going to freeze that bag overnight. Now you have fresh frozen material. that's what we're gonna be washing with. That's what we're gonna agitate. It skips the whole drying, trimming process. It skips a lot of time and a lot of labor that goes into it and helps maintain that really nice color, that white, clear, golden, those really appealing aesthetics that a lot of people are going for in the market today. Dried material, there's a certain window of around a 5 to 10 day dry that we've played with that produces very nice flavor and effects. The color you start to see degrade a little bit just due to natural oxidization. But fully dried, fully cured material is really hard to pull the same level of quality as fresh frozen. It can still be a very affecting and potent. Go ahead.
With fresh frozen, you're also preserving highly volatile terpenes.
Exactly.
That will burn off if you're drying and curing through that whole process. So the fresher, the better. The quicker you can get it frozen off the plant, you're preserving all of that good stuff.
As soon as it's in the freezer, I like to think of it as a lock. I'm locking in what I walked by and chopped that day, and it's gonna stay like that until it's into the rosin, and I'm curing now as rosin versus curing the flower. So you can still cure or you can do fresh press. There's a few different ways, and we'll go through that, especially in the lab out here too. But really trying to keep that high quality, high flavor with that potency and effect to kind of match as well. Fresh frozen is really taking the industry. That's the leader. It's hard to achieve that level of quality without a fresh frozen method. Not saying it can't be done, because there's a sweet window on a 5 to 10 day chop where, or a 5 to 10 day dry, where the flavor just it comes out so strong. You don't need a test to know. I mean, it just really hits you. And so playing around with times, and it's all strain dependent. I mean, it's how much was it off gassing just sitting on the stem, or was it rather sealed up and it wasn't really letting you know what was going on? So trying to figure out your resin glands is part of the genetics. You're gonna have to go through trial and error to find a yielder, to try to find the flavor, and then to match everything up. It takes time. That's generally the harder part about anything to do with if you're gonna press flour, if you're gonna dry sift, or if you're gonna go for fresh frozen. It's really just comes back to genetics. How well did you take care of that throughout its life? And then what are you doing with it now?
With the fresh frozen, can you, like, once it's in the freezer, kind of just leave it for a week and then come back to it?
Yeah.
You have to process it kind of,
So
only can be in there so long before you have to process it.
I try to tell people when we're really going for super high quality, I don't like anything over a month in a freezer.
Okay.
Anything over a month, I start to see it dry out in the freezer, and then
That's high standards.
I
Start getting the freezer taste though too. It seeps
a
through.
little bit, and I do. I am picky. I try to be very timely. I'm generally processing in the next 3 days. If I have it chopped down, or if I'm working with somebody, it's processed in the next 3 days. I don't ever really want it to sit. The longer it sits, it takes more time. Now, I also am rocking at -10, -20 in my freezer all the time. And maybe if I bumped it up to more standard, closer to 0, maybe I'd see a little bit better. But the drying out, and when I see it dry out, now as I'm agitating it inside my bucket, I have more chlorophyll and plant material that are breaking off. You can partially hydrate or fully hydrate during a soak period. When I go to throw in my water, I throw in my ice, I cool everything down, and I throw my material and another little pad of ice on top, and that's the soak period. I'm letting it sit submerged in this ice water so that it fills up enough. The plant material gets a little bit malleable so you can move it around, but it's still frozen because it's always been in that icy water. That's really
Why do you want it malleable like that?
so that I'm not shattering leaves, breaking stuff off. If it's too rigid and you snap a stem, go ahead.
So you put your freshly harvested product in a freezer.
Yep.
-10 to -20.
Yep,
And then you put your bulk hash product in a freeze dryer.
correct, yeah,
Okay,
yep,
and
two
it's
separate.
recorded.
Yes, that
Okay.
it'll run its cycle. It says program to -20, that's the lowest it goes, but that sucker runs to -40, -50 sometimes, and so it just, she pulls.
The shelf temp he was recommending that you set on the freeze dryer was like 10 degrees.
10 degrees. So that's, I like doing a real low temperature. You can go up and we've ran stuff more fast at about 30, 35 degrees. But I like staying frozen the whole time. And so 10 degrees at -40 when it's in that chamber still creates that evaporation to where you can dry it out overnight. If you're in a super humid environment, I've been in one recently, that's something to pay attention to, is just a thermal exchange. So I'm pulling out a tray that is -43 degrees and I pull it out into a room that's 65 degrees and 60% humidity. All that moisture goes right back into the hash and onto the tray. So be mindful of your working environment. If you are working with a freeze dryer where you're in those really negative temperatures, you can see some impact there. And you generally don't want wet hash, even moist hash. So if there's no visible water in there, moist hash, it's still going to stick together, and it just at minimum makes your processes harder to go through, and you'll see more waste. It's stuck to the spoon, it's stuck to the card, it's stuck to the table. So fresh and cold, those are really like the name of the game for anything fresh frozen bubble hash style. Let's see. The soak period. So the soak period, it varies. If we have dried material, I like to soak that a lot longer. I like to partially rehydrate, get a little bit more malleability. So we'll kind of double back on that. Get it so it can flex a little bit in the bucket. I only want the resin gland. I don't want the stock and I don't want plant material. So if everything is solid and stuck together, I have a great chance of actually breaking off plant material that's stuck to the bottom of the stem. When you do that, as you go through and rinse and it warms up, it separates in your bag, in your bubble bag, your collection bag here. And now you're collecting plant material and you're collecting your valuable resin glands. That's how you can take a potentially 6-star, 5-star graded hash and turn it into something that you couldn't grade. You introduce more contaminants than you're going to have in quality. So I like to have everything a little bit malleable. It's about 25 minutes or so on a soak time there for dry. If I'm working with fresh frozen material, it's really nice. It's about a 5-minute soak or about a dab or two. And that usually is about the time that you need. So it's agitation. So now I've got my soak done. There's a few levels of agitation we'll go through. My first wash, when we want to collect that high quality first wash, first press, you maybe seen that advertised. That's a real gentle, short break, and you're just swirling it around. You're not trying to turn over water. You're not trying to just create a tornado. You want to be real gentle, give a steady agitation for 10 minutes. After you give your agitation, you'll let it rest and then you'll drain everything through. I have about a 2-minute rest period is what I like to do. Resin glands are heavier than water, and so they'll fall to the bottom of your bucket. You'll also see that your plant material is a little more buoyant, and so that'll rise to the top. So during your drain, you'll see a more efficient drain as it sweeps the trichomes either out the bottom or they've already settled and now you can remove your bag from the top. There's a couple different ways where how you'll drain your bucket. But you'll essentially repeat those steps and get more aggressive with your agitation as you go on. The idea on the second, third, maybe fourth wash is you're going for yield. You're less focused on quality. You can still focus on quality, but at these points, you're really trying to extract what's left in the plant. Stuff that was inside of the leaves or trapped inside of the bud. You're trying to break that out, but you don't want to do it on the first wash and tear everything open. Get all that plant material, all the chlorophyll inside there and contaminate your hash. Your first pull is generally your cleanest pull that you'll pull out of there. So trying to keep that in a nice managed state is going to help.
How small do you break it down and what type of water do you use?
Yeah, so I use RO water. RO water, there's nothing in it. Whenever I test, it's 0 to, or excuse me, it's 0 to 2 ppm. That's where we test at. And so it's very clean, no contaminants. There's absolutely no chlorine like coming out of a garden hose or anything. So you want to use very, very clean water when you process. And there's very cost effective RO filters, Menards online. I mean, there's a handful of places. They take forever. And so when you're working with RO filter, they're slow, 1,200 gallons a day. filter. It seems like maybe a lot, but it's not that much. So be mindful of your filter, and then what was
How small do you break your material?
1 to 2 inches. I don't like washing fat colas. Those are really hard because now I have this giant mass inside of there, and I have to break that up so aggressive to get inside there that all the other popcorn size, 1 inch, 2 inch size ones, they get thrashed up, and now I'm just it's all chlorophyll. There's nothing good. So if you can't keep consistent size, like I'm gonna wash all my tops or I'm gonna wash all my mids and lowers separately, then break it down to about 1 to 2 inch sizes. That's really kind of the bee's knees. You can wash just about anything, but as far as keeping a efficient, repetitive cycle, it's just good size.
Do you also use filtered ice?
Yeah, so having RO filter, you should on ice machine, if you're running ice machine, then maybe we're not, we're in a home grow. So
Buy it from the garage?
Yeah. yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, like that's the common practice is swing to KT, pick up a bundle and roll with that. But you know, at the end of the day, it's just not clean. There's nothing. You start with clean RO water and then you throw contaminated ice into it, and
Just
It-
make your own ice with the water you created.
and that's
Also, there's a lot of ice, a lot of ice.
yeah, it's a lot of ice. So yeah, let's talk about
You're
the.
just Processing at home, how much are you processing?
Well, and that's what we'll talk, you'll probably be using about 10 pounds of ice, if let's assume we're doing 1 pound. We have a 5-gallon bucket set up, that's what we're working out of. You're gonna use maybe a 10-pound bag of ice throughout the whole run. You're gonna use it for a little in the bucket while you're mixing and a little in your pump sprayer, so you can spray everything down. When you get it into this state, you wanna clean it out by aggressively spraying through it, working any of the small loose contaminants through the bag down into the water below. And so you need to have ice cold water to spray on top of your ice cold hash. Name of the game, keep everything cold. And so about 10 pounds per 5-gallon run is a good average. If you're working in a warm environment, you're 70 degrees, 80 degrees, you for some reason are just working in a sauna, then you're gonna start noticing, you're gonna tear through ice. Every wash, you might start going through a few pounds, a few pounds, a few pounds. And so make ice, I like it. You get a big freezer, make a lot of ice. That's probably,
Yeah, time between.
Yeah.
Process.
that's, No,
You could
yeah.
put it in your 5-gallon bucket, pour the water in your 5-gallon
and
bucket, pour
freeze
it
the buck,
outside,
yeah.
and you've got frozen ice.
And that's the nice thing about this time of year is it makes everything so easy. You're gonna go through less ice in general. That's what I love about it. Open the windows up. You want to be in a cold environment from start to finish. You don't have to be at 32 yourself because that's not fun to work in, but working in about 55-degree weather or 55-degree environment is really ideal. I love that because you can stay comfortable inside that, but at the same time, you're not noticing any tackiness, clumping, any issues during your really washing and collection process. So a cold room, I like to suck out the humidity because anything that's cold, it just wants to pull the humidity back onto the trays, condensation, and everything's wet. So cold and dry, really, really good environment to be in. If you're washing in your kitchen, just open the windows up. That's what we used to do at low temp. We just had the windows in the lab and we just open them all up in the winter, and that was our cold room. So you'll see a lot of people run mini split air conditioners in summertime. To plumb them in, that's a pretty common thing that we do. But that gets costly and ineffective really at a small scale. It's hard to maintain that. So cold environment, cold water. That's keep everything clean.
Keep an eye out for that counter on the weather.
Yeah,
Watch the cold
honestly,
days.
I-
When he starts complaining about the cold days, that's when you should be excited.
oh, I'm gonna wash. Yeah. No, it's honestly a game changer. Otherwise, I fight an air conditioner all the time. And so I'm,
Cold is bad,
yeah,
because then your
Yep.
bags will start gelling up and freezing trichomes in the seams of your micron screens. And it gets clumpy, and then you're losing heads.
Yep.
In the freeze too, so there's a fine line you gotta run.
that's I wouldn't go below 45 in my cold room. I'd keep it above 45. So if we want to set a threshold, I wouldn't go above 60 degrees. I'd notice at literally 62 degrees, I have issues all the time. If I'm at 60 degrees, I have less issues, but I still have them. 55 and 50, just sweet spots. They work every time. But yeah, like he said, don't go too cold, because now you throw your bags on the table and they freeze to your table. And I mean, a bunch of stuff can happen, and it happens quick too.
Don't wanna deal with that.
No, no. Replacing bags is never fun, especially when, if you step up from maybe a 5 gallon and you decide, I want the space and comfort of a 20 gallon. They do cost a little bit of money when you start getting into that, so you always want to take care of them really well. They're nylon. I do isopropyl soak, and so I've got 91 or 99%. 70% isn't really good enough for hash. So I use 90 or 91, 99. A hot water mix. I soak, rinse, clean, and then thoroughly dry before you put them away. No mold, no contaminants. Store them in a safe little cupboard or drawer or something. No dust, no debris. And that kind of goes along with just being organized, really. That's there's so many little steps as you go throughout these processes that if you don't have a dialed in SOP from start to finish, you're gonna find yourself turning around, going back, oh, I should have done this, or this isn't frozen yet. Little things like freezing your spoon while you're washing, keeping everything cold. So now I'm not using a room temperature spoon to collect my frozen hash. You're trying to really dial in your process so every little step counts towards maximum yield and maximum quality at the end of the day. We're dealing with 2% to 7 to 8, 9%. I think you had a monster one day.
It was pretty crazy.
So as far as return, what?
Little amount of flour, it dumps.
That's it's rewarding when it does, but when it's a small yield, you really need to make every spoonful count. Otherwise, you're throwing away that extra dab or maybe a half a cart. It's easy to lose sight of it when you have all of these things to keep track of. So dial in an SOP. You won't do it on your first run or your second run. It takes time. You need to figure out your space. Where's your sink at? Where's your water at? Where's your everything? You kind of got to go through those steps. But once you get it dialed in, it's really smooth, and you're able to repeat this process. It just like get back on a bicycle. It's very easy to set down for the growing season and then pick back up during harvest and get back into it. So once you have these skills, they're really lifelong skills that you can take on. So it's pretty efficient.
The more you do, the more efficient you'll get and familiar working with different heads, and just it'll start clicking.
Work with dry, work with fresh frozen, work with trim, work with sifted stuff. Try everything and see why do people gravitate here, but how can people make this still so high quality? It's trying to figure out the different nuances. Every grow is different, every strain's different, every wash environment's different. And so you're battling all these variables, and it's important to keep track of them. It's important to just in your head, some people document, I tried to, but you get so many washes in, and after a point you just lose the stuff. And it's just keep it in your head, just pay attention.
Well, that stuff is really rewarding, I think, over time too, as you spend a lot of time over the years doing this. It gets really rewarding to be able to like look at that hash, maybe have an issue or have a situation where you're not maybe getting what you thought you would out of it, you know, but you can look at it, look at where your trichomes are landing in which bag, what size they are, that then can start kicking back to your grow. And now you can start growing to, you know, have that final result in mind and know, you know, maybe I need to take this 10 weeks growing instead of 9 weeks, or maybe, you know, I need to spend more attention with the microscope, you know, and just be able to watch those trichomes so I know that those are maximized, you know, or monitor those temperatures in your room.
Yeah, and maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. So eyeing up for chopping. When do I harvest for my fresh frozen? Am I taking it to full term like I would my dried material? A lot of the time it's no. We're gonna chop just on the early side. You don't have to do anything crazy like a couple weeks or a month or anything, but 5 and 10 days can make a huge difference in the number one, the flavor. It can be good and bad. Sometimes if you chop too early, you're going to miss out on valuable terpenes that haven't been produced yet, or the amount of them. But if you chop a little too late, you're gonna notice it dries up. Maybe some of the terpenes aren't there anymore that were present during that super fresh, cloudy resin head. So finding your chop window, I like suggesting about a 10 to 20% amber resin gland coverage from top to bottom of my plant. If I took the whole average of the plant, I'd have about 10 to 20% that had changed from cloudy resin heads to amber. And to me, that's a great way to maintain a more broad spectrum for your cannabinoids, your flavonoids, and your terpenes, everything that you really want to drive you or to drive the rosin. And so you can chop early. I just did a run where we were just messing around. It was honestly about 14 days early, and then we chopped again at 4 days early. And it's fun when you do that because it comes out and it's really great for Instagram, right? Like it's just great pictures. Everybody likes it. But I didn't like it as much when I smoked it. I felt like I was missing a lot of flavor. Normally I just have a punch of orange that comes through the strain and it was gone. It was very sweet and creamy. It was still a delicious dab, but it wasn't what it was. We'd ran the strain multiple times. It's one of our favorites in it. So that's why we mess around with that. Check your times. If you can, if you liked your genetic, keep it, run it again. Keep playing with that same thing to really dial in. What are the specs? Where do I chop? How long am I gonna wash for? Do I need 4 washes? Can I get away with 2? Trying to figure out your SOP again goes back to genetics and are they what you want to achieve? So keeping that in mind.
It's like a ripe strawberry or something, you know, if you harvested a strawberry and you saw it, you know, it might be a little, or you're at the grocery store, it might be a little bit not as plump as another one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I mean, it's that kind of a feel and a variance and something that you just want to really pay attention to. And, you know, they're both maybe good, but you know, if you have that really, really ripe, just perfectly picked, you know, strawberry, that's when it's gonna maximize that flavor. It's the same way with the trichomes.
Exactly. And anytime you want to start changing the flavor, that's when I like to start curing. That's when I like to start working on maybe a couple post processes where I'm taking this fresh press and seeing over time, different temperatures, how I can convert that or how it's going to convert itself really through just like the natural drying. If you were going to dry and cure your flower, we do a similar thing with a sealed jar. That might be like the next slide
Yeah,
too.
I think we have one more question.
Oh, yep, my bad.
How many different strains can you use in one like hash, like say 4 different plants put them together and just make one
yeah.
big hash?
Oh, heck yeah, infinite. There's
Wild as you feel.
yeah, there's possibilities. And sometimes that's those are really fun washes because maybe you have material, but it's a low yield on this side, but it's got a great flavor. So having it spiced in with something that actually dumped, it's going to help you out quite a bit. So I don't do it a ton, but we've done it before, and it's actually really fun when you get to do that. I love it.
And you could
Yeah.
toss something
Something
really
really
toss a
unique.
couple
It
different
is.
nugs in a bag too, and kind of see how that smells together.
Yep.
You know, and kind of play around with how that might.
Just take like the 3 to 4 different strains, break them together, mix them up, and then smoke.
Yeah. No, that like a hash hole, just having something good on the outside and shove something in, just get that compounding effect. No, absolutely. Infinite.
So I think the next thing we had was just sort of a visual broken down of the stuff that you already talked through. So as like a home processor, if you're looking to do it, it's basically sort of 4 steps to making that bubble hash.
Just 4.
Oh yeah,
That's it.
I did. So easy, right, guys? What do you get for it?
You're gonna spend most of your time doing prep work. It's really about
cleaning.
cleaning everything.
Yeah.
Dust free, keeping your temperature.
Old
your
Ben
humidity.
over there, that's my right hand guy. I found him last year and we were, I want to make hash. I want to see it. He's really knowledgeable. He had really good drive for it. So I'm like, all right, let's start doing this. And he realized all we do is clean. He's like, dude, I'm just washing these washing these bags, these buckets. Like, Ben, you got water on the floor. Like it's always cleaning. You're just constant maintenance. But that's how you are able to start making that 5-star, 6-star, that really high grade is because you don't have even just dust and debris from the table wafting in. I mean, you really want to be hygienic. Think of it as a food grade space. You're inhaling this product at the end of the day. So you don't want to have anything that's not in my opinion, natural, which is this process, it's
You
just.
can taste dust. for sure,
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
you
it-
can taste it if it's dusty and everything wants to stick to that rosin and, you know, it takes little hairs in the air or anything like that. So I mean, you wipe everything down, it really makes a big difference to, you know,
That's
anybody who's done it,
certain
you get to the
bags,
end and you're just like, man,
microfibers.
you will clean everything.
No
you know,
paper
so-
towels,
No paper
you can
towels.
use it for soaking up water or doing whatever, if you're gonna do some quick, you know, scrub something down, but. Microfibers, your isopropyl and microfibers for doing any pressing, washing, anything, those are just gonna be your best friends. Bleach at the end, you know, go through some of your surfaces maybe that are gonna touch, but I don't bleach my bags, I don't bleach any of my hash surfaces, anything that's gonna touch any of that, it's isopropyl and hot or cold water, really, so.
And then, yeah,
A lot, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're gonna talk a lot more about the actual pressing of that bubble hash, once you've got that made in just a couple of minutes. We're actually gonna sort of skip ahead of that process slightly, talk a little bit about post-processing, and then come on back to pressing when we talk about that flour and bubble hash. So in your minds, think we've just pressed a bunch of bubble hash, you'll know what that means in a minute. Now we're gonna talk about post-processing, and we'll come on back.
Yep. So from curing to edibles to cart filling, post-processing is generally just referred to as the process you're taking after you've created rosin or hash, however you view it. And I mean, there's many different ways. We'll hit a couple common ones. There's a warm cure method. So I've just taken my fresh pressed material. I have it in my glass jar with a sealed lid. I really like metal lids. I don't like plastic lids with the little, excuse me, the little foam bumpers inside that give them the seal. I don't like doing any of that for curing because under pressure, now it's gonna escape underneath that foam. And so you're losing your terpenes. The metal lid and a glass jar are some of the best. And if you can, find a UV resistant jar. They're generally the blue jars. They're the more opaque glass. And that's just if you don't have a great place. I use cupboards and stuff, so I've got my stuff always hidden, so I use clear jars, but if you're in direct sunlight and you're doing a warm cure, then I would definitely use a UV jar. But a warm cure, you can kind of vary in temperature from, we'll say 80 degrees to maybe 120. I wouldn't really, starts to get a little warm around there. But you're taking your material, you're heating it back up to that 80 to 120 range, and then you're allowing it to break down inside the jar. The terpenes, the oils, it's gonna start to rise in there a little bit. And then after, I don't know, about 45 minutes, if we're working with a 5-gram jar, let's say it's just a 5-gram jar, after maybe a half hour, we'll say, you're gonna go inside and you're gonna whip it all up. Combine everything back together. I really like to throw everything back in and then I'll seal it back up and I'll throw it back on. I generally use my press. My press stays warm enough when it's turned on, so I just set it on top of my press. Let it all recombine. Repeat that process of heat, cool off, whip it, back to heat, cool off, whip it. You'll start to notice the texture change. It'll go from a thick, cold Laffy Taffy type shatter down to a butter and then into a bit more of a batter. And the butter batter type of thing, just think of butter and cake batter. One's more liquid, one's still soft, but still kind of a solid. So as you see these changes, it's up to you to halt the process, to stop it. I like this consistency. I want to dab on it here. And so then you'll pull that off, throw it in your refrigerator, and now you're kind of locking in where you just cured at. You can do it under different temperatures. The higher the temperature, the more you might notice your material degrade in terms of flavor and color. And so generally longer and lower temperatures are going to help you really preserve quality during curing. And that kind of brings us into cold curing. Cold curing and room temperature curing. Both of these are kind of similar, where you're going to be leaving the jar for 7 days in somewhere from a 65 degree to a refrigerator for the cold cure. So if we're doing room temperature, generally not a 75 degree room. You want it to be on the side of 65, 70. You'll leave it again out of the sunlight and then just set it aside for about 5 days. After these 5 days, you'll notice basically a color shift in the bottom of your jar as your oil, your terpenes start to separate and pull to the top. Once you have a nice layer of terpenes on top, I like to wait until I actually see that start to suck back down inside the rosin, and then I'll go and whip that all back up. You can whip it before you see it all the way separate. You can whip it after it's all the way recombined. You can catch it at different points, but doing it too early, you'll notice it's less shelf stable. So if you leave it not in a refrigerator or not in the freezer, it'll start to re-separate again. And so if it's not fully separated and starting to recombine again, you might have to go back into your jar and whip it to recombine their full profile. So the room temperature, generally you're done in about 10 days. I don't know, 7 to 10 days is kind of a good time frame for that. But your refrigerator or something cool, like maybe 40 degrees, you're gonna be doing that for up to 2 months sometimes. So it's a really long process, but it can really change the complex flavors that maybe you didn't notice off the fresh press. It brings to light a lot of unique profiles. So generally curing is kind of taken over. It's easier to dab, fresh press shatter. You'll shard some stuff off if you don't bring it up to temp. It's a little bit less flavor sometimes. Some people think of it as a little cleaner. And then when you get into the cured, you really flavor, potency. It's taken over. That's a pretty common way nowadays. So cart filling. All right. So we remember decarbon for edibles, where we threw it in and we watched all these bubbles rise up, got all crazy, then it settled down and we have no bubbles. And when we're filling carts, we want zero, absolutely zero micro bubbles still rising inside the jar. If you think you might have saw one, leave it in there for a few more hours or another half a day. I mean, you want your viscosity of your rosin to be dialed in. A lot of different hardware on the market. I really like O2. Those have been some that I've been, O2 vapes. Those have been some that I've been finding a lot of success with. They have some Kung Fu, Turk Logic, I'm trying to think of who else I like. Cure Pro's got some good solventless carts. Basically, when you're shopping around for your hardware, the biggest thing I like to look for, just a base thing, is how large are those intake holes if you're using a cotton wick. I don't like those for rosin, but if you're using one, you need large intake holes. Otherwise, if you're in the cotton-free method, generally you're working for your resistance. So about a 1.6 to 2 ohm, somewhere in there for your electrical resistance. That's going to provide a really efficient burn without compromising flavor on hardware. So it's a little technical, but find stuff that's specific to solventless and you won't have to pay too much attention to that. Otherwise, if you're shopping around, maybe trying to find a good deal on something, look at your intake hole diameter and then make sure you don't have something that's going to fry your material. So hardware, but now we're decarbing. We're watching the bubbles get all crazy. We're letting them all settle back down. 0 bubbles inside the jar. Now I'm going to pull it out of the oven, completely let it cool back down again to room temperature. So I'm not off gassing any of the terpenes again. And then at the end of it, you're going to crack. I put a metal cover. I always use the quilted ball jars with the removable lid. And then I always rest the cap on top. I leave the threaded piece off and I'll set it back in my oven and I'll set my oven to 110 to 120, strain dependent. If it's a little thicker, then I have to turn it up a little higher. But at about 110 is the temperature that I start using my syringe to suck up the oil, and then I'll inject it into my carts. If you have a cotton wick cart, after you get done injecting your rosin into the cart, you need to take the carts. You should take the carts and throw them back into the oven at that same temperature so you can wick the carts. It lets it become viscous enough to flow back into the cotton where you get a fully wicked cart. If you don't do that, a lot of times you'll notice a burned cotton flavor on your first draw. Your second draw, oh, I got some rosin, but now you're also getting that burned cotton for every draw. And so it can essentially ruin the cart just off the first rip. So if you're using cotton wicks, always soak them, put them back in the oven, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Generally, you'll see an air bubble rise to the top. When you see your air bubble start working its way through, you know you're soaking into your cotton. Again, cotton wicks, they're a little bit more frowned upon nowadays. And I'll just say specifically for rosin, the reason why cotton wicks are tough is because it's such a fine mesh to work through, that a full cotton wick, it doesn't regulate that thick oil. If it's distillate or if it's cut with terpenes, if it's got something that helps maintain that viscosity, cotton wicks work really well with those. But when it's a more viscous product, you can run into some issues. The O2 vapes I use, they are not cotton free, but they only have a wrap of cotton around the ceramic element, and it's just a single layer filter. That I've found to be very effective in keeping it clean hit without having cotton burn or any issues on the cotton side. So I really think they're killing it. They're doing a good job out there. I've seen the last few Instagram posts from some manufacturers around here, and they're starting to pick up traction in Minnesota. So I think other people are seeing the same success that we've seen. But yeah, once you've got it wicked, or let's say you just filled a cart that didn't need wicking, now you're going to cap that off, and I like to let them all rest back down to room temperature before ripping again. The 120-degree liquid inside a lithium battery, you got to kind of keep a little common sense if you have a full disposable style. Don't throw your batteries back in the oven. So if you have something and you're working out micro bubbles, never throw that back in there. Probably common sense, I know, but we got to say it. Micro bubbles are another thing. I don't like having a lot of tiny little bubbles inside of my cart, because as you're burning through, you're sucking in and burning a little air. Maybe you're degrading the rosin in there. I smoke them too fast for that to happen. So it's mainly just wrecking the cart. So carding. Does anybody have questions on carding? It's honestly a pretty easy process. It's nothing crazy. Just decarb it. Pull it up at a warmer temperature so you can actually maneuver the liquid, and then cap and let it cool. They're pretty easy to do. So,
Is there any kind of like bag range ballpark of how many carts per like ounce or so of raw flour that you start eating?
So it's all subjective due to yield of rosin. Let's say we wash a pound, we get like 3%, maybe like 15 grams come out of that. Yeah, I mean, if you're in half grams, right, you got 30. I don't know. You'd probably be somewhere around like the 5 to maybe 15 grams. It's so subjective. I've washed stuff that is just not. I've got nothing out of it. I washed a mountain of it before, and I've also washed stuff where it's just been a pound and now I get like 7% out of it. This is crazy. So it's all that kind of goes back into more the genetic side.
And a lot of people will test in a corn mason jar.
Yes.
Before you watch
Yes.
anything.
Oh, yes. No, the shake test. Yeah. So I just grew this plant. I have no idea what it does. How do I test it out? Take ice cubes and let's mimic a wash. Ice cubes in your water, let everything get down to frozen, put in like 7 grams. I love using 7 grams because then I'm not wasting a ton, but I'm actually getting somewhat of a representation. And you just got to shake it for 10 minutes, sit there and shake that thing. Now you're going to let it rest for about 30 minutes. You're going to see your trichome settle to the bottom. I look for a nice thick layer around the bottom rim. If I can see just a nice thick coating of resin glands or that nice white opaque gland, I get really excited over that. If I just see one corner of this jar with a couple little flakes in it, I would never wash that. It helps you really gauge, is this worth drying or is this worth washing? what steps am I gonna take with that material? So, yeah, thank
You
you.
don't know unless, you
No.
know, I mean, besides looking at the microscope, looking at the actual trichome, because some trichomes, they have a thick neck.
Yeah,
And it doesn't want to snap off.
no,
And so that's why people, you know, in the commercial industry, people pretty much stick to specific strains that they know are very successful, have,
cut life.
you know, the perfect size trichome head, because if you're on that low side that John's talking about, it's really depressing.
Yeah,
Like,
it's disheartening.
You
You
know,
put in.
It's a
a
labor
half-
of love for
It
sure.
is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and don't let that discourage you, you have to learn, I have made so many mistakes pressing black shatter, washing hash already, some dry sifted hash, I mean, just try to do stuff with stuff and it doesn't pan out sometimes, so try everything, but pay attention to those variables. Why did it turn out like this? What can I do next time? How do I correct it? Because that's kind of how you're gonna evolve and learn, again, your process, your SOP, your grow, your everything. It really gets personalized when you're down to it. You wanna, everything I'm doing is different than what Cornell's doing and different than what Casey's
What works
doing.
best for you, like, might
Yeah.
not work best for us. What works best for us might not work best for you, so.
But all of us have that common goal of preserving the same quality for our end product. And so there's common steps that we take, like cold temperature, clean rooms, clean water, like these kind of basic things, but they really add up at the end. And so that organization, that cleaning, it gets a little bit overwhelming, but I mean, it's so important in being efficient and turning something that you didn't know into something very fruitful, so.
Does the pH level of the water that you're using to wash with matter at all?
Oh, that's a curveball. I,
If it's
That was
RO,
nice.
it's gonna be the same pH,
Yeah.
it's gonna be around 5 to 6, because. You know, RO water won't have anything affecting the, you know, the pH level of it.
I couldn't answer that in honest to tell you if there's a difference in like, you know, if you're at 13 or, I mean, I'm sure you could see some sort of difference, but yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't give you anything on that.
It's a good question.
That is, I'm probably gonna look into that myself, honestly.
All
Yeah.
RO is gonna be the same pH.
Yeah, that breaking it down to just using RO water, at first you gotta run a little line or hook it up to your sink or do something. It's a little bit of thinking around, but it's very effective at the end. I love using RO water. It's zero contaminants, zero anything in there. The caution with RO water though, it builds bacteria super fast, especially when you leave it directly in sunlight. And so don't leave it stored in open caps or containers out in the light. Clean your jugs out, clean everything out. You don't want any funky smells going into your rosin. That's not a lot of us, maybe probably not testing our stuff. It's all home stuff, it's all home use. And so just trying to keep that mindset of, yeah, I'm not testing it, but I still want it to be something that could be tested. So clean equipment again, but RO water will build up bacteria a little bit faster, and so just pay attention to that. There's no chlorine in it, right? So yeah, what's up?
Oh, what would you use to like clean out the bottle that you would store RO water in, like just regular?
Yeah, so an isopropyl, I'm just a big fan of isopropyl because it evaporates. Gallons of it. I mean, it's the unfortunate chemical of the solventless process, but it's just your cleanup process. 91 and 99% really dissolve the membrane and the stalk, and so you can wash out your bags very clean. You can clean the inside of jars, and it also helps with the algae buildup. If you have mold and if you've gone too far and you're already at that point, you need to start using bleach. You need to really correct the situation, but generally keeping things clean and dry using isopropyl, letting everything air dry after your isopropyl, you're not going to get to that point. And so just trying to stay on top of it really with ISO that's kind of the best method.
I have a question. You keep mentioning bleach for cleaning.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on using high peroxide? I usually buy like 35% peroxide and then dose it down.
Yeah.
And when I wash my things.
I see people do that for sure. That's a common thing. I
It kind of helps
I see it in
bacteria, keeps that fungi down.
Yeah.
So if you add washing soda to your peroxide, you get like OxyClean.
People like doing it for their bags, so if they're gonna do like long-term soaks in their bags, the hydrogen peroxide is really good for that aspect, but diluted down, and I mean, if you're at like 30%, that's probably not too bad, but I see a lot of like 5 and 10% solutions, that's kind of the more
Well,
common
if you
way.
buy it at that 35%, you have that option to kind of.
Yeah, water it
Peroxide
down.
Basically charged water,
Yeah.
so that evaporates as
Yeah.
well, similar.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering if there was gonna be like some
Yeah.
residue. I'd be more concerned with bleach leaving a residue.
Yeah, anytime I clean with bleach, I always go back through with isopropyl. I'm just religious about that being the last thing that touches my surface, because then it evaporates off. You give it a clean, dry wipe after that for any film, anything, but if I ever clean with bleach, you're exactly right, the film, you don't wanna leave that, and you'll see it on a stainless table, you'd only ever make that mistake one time, I mean, it shows up so quick.
So you're just going up to 99%.
Yeah.
You don't have to get crazy with it. Say,
No.
last time I made FICO, I used like a 200%.
No.
You just keep it.
Nothing,
Well, 200 proof is 99.
Oh, it is.
oh, proof, yeah,
Proof,
yeah, no,
Just
you're.
putting the two numbers in my head together.
You're good. That's,
a lot.
The 200 proof.
Sure.
With the night, okay.
no, yeah,
I wish they had 200%.
Just melt everything.
I tried when I was doing like small runs, I tried saving like $1 a bottle or something, and I went with 70%. And I was like, oh, this stuff's strong. I cleaned my rigs with it, and it would not clean out my bag. I worked so hard to break that down. So I really, 91 would be the lowest. If you can find 99%. Generally that's an online purchase, and so if you can get your 99%, then that'll help you even more. But
Amazon.
yeah,
Yeah.
buy the
And
gallon.
a lot of people clean in your bags at the end. I mean, a lot of people use those Pyrex baking dish,
Oh.
you know, and then, you know, if you get like a 9x9 or a larger one, you could basically,
Yeah.
you know, you can basically take one bag at a time, put a thin layer of the ISO in there, and then you can just put, you know, the bottom where all your trichomes have,
Yeah.
you know, been sitting in the bag.
Yeah,
You clear that out, you got some residue, you can just dip those in there, you know, and then make sure you got hanging hooks, you can just hang your bags to dry.
Yeah,
They don't want them setting on anything, so you want a hook rack for all your bags for sure, and that's just one of the prep things where it's like. You have all this stuff, maybe you have a cooler with like cold tools and a cold
Yep.
spoon. You know, all you need is a little ice cooler, I brought a cooler with me, so, you know, you just, all you need is a little cooler in your area, you know what I mean, spot for your ice. And,
yeah.
you know, that prep work, just thinking through every step that you're gonna do.
A
You don't have that
5-gallon
prep.
bucket with a lid to seal all your bags in
That's
after
how-
they're clean, to keep dust
Yeah.
out. Like
Yeah.
a linen closet, one of them zipper, almost similar to a mini greenhouse
Yeah,
type deal. Just to keep dust out of your bags and all, any contaminants you can do.
fine particles, you might not be able
Those
to see them,
extra
but
steps.
the backside, the bag picture was up
Okay,
there.
great.
Where
The
OCD
small
before you
holes.
will be
Yeah.
at. For sure.
It doesn't take long, honestly. I mean, it's one of those things where you mess up too many times and you just have to keep redoing something, and so you just will never mess that up again.
Or you'll work all hard at this hash and do everything right, and then you'll be sitting there like taking a nice beautiful picture,
Uh-huh.
and smoking, they'll see a little piece of lint, just like.
Yep.
And yeah, and it'll make you clean a lot, for sure.
Clean, clean, clean.
So we're gonna go ahead and move
yeah.
on slightly here to talking about pressing flour. Sort of what we're gonna be doing here a little bit here today. So we're gonna hand off the microphone. Yeah, John, thank you so much for explaining
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So then I'll hand it off to you to talk a little bit more about pressing of flour.
Yeah, pressing flower rosin. Well, thanks, John.
Yeah.
John is really, we're fortunate to be over here. I'm really excited just to listen to him talk about stuff, because, you know, it's a lot of work to make hash, and, you know, there can be, you know, it can be difficult. So I really applaud you guys for, you know, taking the initiative to come in here, and it's probably gonna be the best money that you'll spend, because I mean, 1 gram or 2 grams, all it's gonna take to make up for the class cost, but you know, it'll really save you a lot of time. And I know, you know, John is somebody we've talked on the phone, and he's like me, where we just really want to help people. We really want people to have a
Yeah.
positive experience with cannabis, you know, and that's the most important thing for us. And so really try and learn from our mistakes, because, you know, I know that's what all 3 of us are thinking. It's just some of that stuff can get really gut wrenching. So, you know, stick to those temperatures, stick to that preparation, stick to that cleanliness. You know what I mean? Everything else will just go a lot better, you know, and you'll be way ahead of the game. But yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that stuff.
Thank you.
Flower rosin, you know, I do bubble hash, but I do a lot of flower rosin. Stefan with Cornell Urban Agriculture, and we're local out of Northeast Minneapolis. We grow indoor hemp cannabis, and we make primarily all solventless products from our hemp. So we make a live rosin tincture, you know, which is bubble hash. We also add flower rosin to it. We add rosin to our creams. And then, you know, we just really enjoy it. You know, I'm nuts about rosin. I think it's just a lot of fun. It's a great way to make edibles. It's a great way to properly dose everything because, you know, as I think Doug was asking about earlier, you can basically, you know, you can get into that 10% range where, you know, if you have a concentrate of rosin on there, you know, it hasn't touched any chemicals. You're gonna know it's, you know, it's a pretty good indication of how strong it is, how potent it is. And that's gonna be able to, you know, you're gonna be able to share edibles with other friends and family, you know, and let it and feel comfortable knowing that they're gonna have a safe experience. They're gonna have a positive experience because we've all heard everybody talk about their horrible experiences having, you know, way too much. So it's really, you know, I think the difference between making edibles at home and for people like us making them really is that accuracy. It's really just, you know, that repeatability. So, you know, I'm guessing that's a lot of what you guys are after too. So with that, we'll talk about flower rosin. You know, primarily what I do at Cornell Urban Ag is press flower rosin. We've pressed over, you know, 75 pounds of flower rosin over at our spot, you know, even on little tiny presses. So, you know, just over all day long, you know, just grinding it out. One thing, the most important thing that's important for flower rosin is that you have high quality material and that it's fresh. You know, that's by far the most important thing and aspect. I brought with me some 2-month-old flower and some fresh flower that's right out of cure today. So, you know, after we go into the lab, we'll be able to kind of see the exact same strain on my exact same hemp, you know, with 2-month-old flower versus something fresh. And, you know, one thing that I expect us to see is that you're going to see a lot higher yield. You're going to see a lot better color out of it. You're going to see a lot more flavor. And what we've done because of that at our business is, you know, we really upgraded our press so that we can do more volume, and we're pressing through that as fast as we possibly get that sorted. So, you know, once they hang dry and they cure, you know, and we trim them down, we're going to separate out all the kind of smaller nugs, you know, the ones that aren't as desirable looking in the flower bag, you know, and those are great for pressing. You know, they sit in the bags really well. Sometimes the bigger nugs aren't as good. So we personally, like, if we buy our flour, it's always big nugs, and then, you know, we always use all our smaller nugs for pressing. And you want to do that right away because it's really going to change your yield, and it's really going to change the quality of it. It doesn't mean that you can't use flour that's older. You definitely can. But it's always going to be optimal for your yield and for your quality to be able to use that at the beginning. If we had 2-month-old flour and we pressed that out, basically similar to leaving it, as John was talking about, leaving it in the freezer for a long time, you know, you're going to have the same experience. The waxy shell is going to get drier, you know, and it's just not going to produce as much. And with that being said, that also relates to the water content, the humidity content of what you're pressing. That is going to be the next biggest thing, you know, is your humidity of the actual flower. And so if anybody was at the dry cure class with the Bovedas, you know what I mean? If you don't know, and it's maybe tough to make sure that your material is of the right humidity, definitely throw in a Boveda pack. You know, I try not to use them because typically what you do when you're curing is you're going to want to, you know, let the plant hang. It's going to release a lot of its moisture, and then it's going to release a little bit less moisture every day as it gets a little bit drier. You know, and as it gets drier, it's going to be more of a fine line because now you're getting close to that threshold of where you want the moisture. So typically, you know, the idea of curing is that you're going to want to reduce that, you know, let it dry off, reduce that moisture. And then as you're getting closer to that optimum level, you're gonna wanna reduce the air circulation, you're gonna wanna reduce, so that's why a lot of times we'll dry it to a certain level and then put it in bins, where it's got maybe half air volume, and now that's gonna just give it a little more cushion to be able to evaporate off, but maybe not get whisked away with a big wind gust. And so you ideally wanna just be dropping that humidity level, letting that moisture level drop on your flower until it gets to that optimum amount, not anymore. You typically don't want to be over drying it, then rehydrating it, but it happens to all of us. It happened to me this week. You know what I mean? And then you throw in a Bovita pack. You know what I mean? You get these colder temps coming through fall into the winter. All of a sudden your humidity really, really drops inside your rooms. And you start having to play with humidifiers, and there comes, a time. So the season can really dictate a lot of that with curing, and that's the toughest part. You can do everything perfect in one little dry spell on one day, and you're not paying attention, and that's all it takes. But, that's where those Bovedas are gonna come in really handy. But make sure that that's got that moisture level, because the moisture level is actually gonna really affect the viscosity, and that's what the term for the fluidity of the rosin. And so if you have dry rosin, or even if you have dry air in your room, you might have a wet, nice moist material that's at 60%, that's pressing really well. If you got a really dry environment, you might see it coming off the press and flowing really nicely, and then you'll see that drip, and it's just gonna stop. And what's happening is it's actually getting robbed of all of its moisture as it's dripping, because it wants to equalize with the air. So, I went back into the pressing room, a couple days ago, and one of my guys, it was like 52%. I just like freaked out, and I was like, you can't press it here until it's 60%. Like, do not press, and you just lose yield. Yeah, you just lose yield. Commercially, it's going to make more of a difference, obviously, but it's that important. Your freshness of your material, your quality of your material, then your humidity level, in your actual environment, so all those things are definitely going to give you the best results. So fresh, keep that humidity up, in your material, if you need to use a Boveda, you know what I mean? Don't feel bad doing it. If I didn't have a big 60% cure room all the time, I mean, it makes it really easy for us to do things when you got a room and you got perfect air exchange. The room is open, it's not getting stuffy in there, and it maintains. But when you're at home, it can be tough. So those Bovedas can come in really handy if you don't have a perfectly dialed kind of room and setup for that.
So
Yeah.
optimal for pressing flower is cured? Fresh
Yeah.
off the plant, dried, cured?
Yeah, for pressing flower, typically you want, optimum I would say is when you're in the sweating stage of curing. And so basically when you hang the plant, it dries, maybe you trim it and chop it, and now, it's almost ready to get sealed up in the bag, but it might have just a little bit too much moisture. We call that sweating, where you might just leave it in the bag and leave it open, so that there's not those big, gusts of air that can really over dry it out. You're just kind of limiting how much it can lose that moisture. And so right in that kind of sweating stage, is right where I would feel is optimal press, because you do want some of that moisture in there. And a lot of what is there is just going to evaporate off as, from the heat of the press, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But yeah, you definitely want that, because if it's drier, you'll definitely notice it's just not going to run. You know what I mean? It really makes a big difference. So your material wants to be 60% humidity, in the bag consistently. Your environment, you want in that 60 to 70% range. You can get away with 55, 60, okay. But once you start getting below 55, you're definitely going to notice a lower yield off of there. So, if you need to go into a smaller room with a humidifier or something like that, you know what I mean? I would recommend that, but it really makes a big difference. And then flower rosin is probably what you guys are going to be pressing most. You know what I mean? Bubble hash is by far the most fun. It's really rewarding. It's going to give you the best quality of material. But a lot of times, we're just going to want to make some quick edibles or have some product for us, or be able to consolidate that.
Or yield, right? That's even.
Or yield. Yield is a huge one. Yep. Yield with flower rosin, could be a game changer for you. Bubble hash, if you're after that pristine top quality in the market, that's where the bubble hash is going to be really handy. Personally, my balance with it is I like to take a lot of the sugar leaf off my trim, and I'll take all my sugar leaf off after I trim all the buds, and I'll wash that immediately. you know, and just like, John was saying, you know, those are dry leaves, so you'll actually put that in ice water, let them soak for a while, you know, so they're not shattering into a million little dust, you know, pieces of green. So then you just let that soak. I'll wash that, have a nice little small, you know, chunk of bubble hash, you know, that I can enjoy. And then I'll typically press all my rosin for tincture, for edibles, for stuff like that. You know, so.
Easier way, what I do with my sugar leaf, usually similar process, but I'll just use it with my keef box and dry sift it. And then you can take that keef that's already cured and dried and bag it and press that. Instead of having to go through the whole wash and drying cycle, you can get a quicker turnaround with your dry sift press than you would.
With the genetics and the quality that everybody's really shooting for, from chop to whether you're drying or curing. I mean, that dry sift, that trim hash, that's some high quality stuff.
That's mostly what I
That's-
smell.
yeah,
Like
that's-
mostly dry
In my
sift.
opinion, that's pure solventless extract at its finest.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
But you're gonna have, with dry sift, you're typically gonna have more contaminants in it. Like if you press the bubble hash, you're typically gonna get a 70 to 80% return. You know, if you press dry sift, it's not uncommon to get a 50% return. That just means that there's more contaminants, there's more particulate matter in there with your trichomes that are eating up that space and yield. So the dry sift's great. You know, that's what I smoke primarily. You know, I really like it when you're trimming. You got a nice, you know, if you got one of those $40-50 trim bins, like you can trim, lift that up, scrape it up, you know, and smoke that. You got a nice cookie, you know, before any of your stuff is ready.
Collect, and then I'll refine that down.
Yeah,
Through
pressing.
So
Yeah.
you are getting a cleaner.
Yep, and if you,
Equivalent return as bubble,
Yeah. By using.
but it's a little
bags-
more work, you just,
Yeah.
you know.
and what they're saying is that, you know, a lot of times you might not have a freeze dryer, you might not have this. So dry sift is a great way to go to not have a lot of high investment, you know, up front, but have a killer product on there.
Absolutely.
Now you can have something as simple as a trim bin, you trim, you know, lift it up, collect your stuff, have some good trim over there, or you can invest in having multiple screen sets like you would have for bubble hash, where you have, you know, the different micron sizes, you layer those, they get finer and finer and finer. You put your material on top. Let's say you had that trim, that dry sift from your trim bin, you collected that up, you could smoke that, but let's say you just want to make it better, make it a cleaner product, make it something a little closer to a bubble hash type of product. You can basically buy those multiple screens, put that material right on top, you know, sift it around, shake it, you know, move back and forth. And as it's gonna fall, you know, basically, it'll separate the size trichomes, and then you get down to the bottom. And basically the idea is that you wanna go all the way through the screens, push them through all the way through. And then any of those little particulates and contaminants are gonna actually fall through all the screens. You know what I mean? And then basically what you're left with is the 3 different grades, and then a lot of the particulates kind of on the bottom. So that way you can kind of just clean it up, you know, take a 50, you know, a dry sift that might press at 50%, get rid of some of those contaminants through these filters, you know, and now, you know, you're smoking less of those and you're just gonna have a cleaner, pure product, you know, over there. So that's a real common thing. But when you're done with all that trim and, you know, you've decided what you want to do with bubble hash or, you know, dry sift, you know, my favorite thing is press the flower rosin. And it's really simple. All you have to do is just load. We have really tiny, small filter bags that are usually 1.5 inches in width, all the way up to 3 inches in width. And those are just little tiny bags. They're gonna vary in size, but typically we're gonna use a 90 micron size for flower rosin. That's pretty much the kind of go-to, I would say, for everybody. I wouldn't really mess around with any other ones. You can go to 115 or 120. The 90's fantastic, if you ask me. But we're gonna pack up those.
What's that?
Or lower.
Yeah, it really what I would do if I went
90s.
lower, I'd repress my rosin. So
Yeah.
that's, it gets to be a little finicky, but we actually like
For
doing
return.
that to fraction out, for
Yeah.
returns, but. And we can actually do that quite a bit to fraction out THCA, and you start getting your white powder that you get out of it. It's all solventless. But repressing the rosin, so you pressed out your flower rosin, maybe you've done it through a 120 bag or something that was a little larger, and you got a good return out of it, but you really want to clean that out. Throwing it inside of a 25 or a 37, probably I'd use a 37, you just keep your yield up since you're repressing. Giving it that smaller filtration point to maybe pull out some of those contaminants could help. Not necessary, I mean, it'll help clean up the dab, but I'm just as happy with you.
Basically, there's no end to how much you can refine it.
Yeah,
down
every
at the
time
end, so
you
that's what
take
this
it
whole thing-
further, you're gonna be losing something in the process.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be taking terpenes out every time you further refine that product, you're gonna be losing quality medicine that you probably want.
Yeah.
You don't wanna lose that, so.
Yeah, and you might be asking yourself, like, you know, how far do you go, or what do you do, and that could get a little overwhelming, and it's really a personal preference, because. You know, some people wanna have like the finest, you know, wine you ever heard of, you know, and some people are fine with $3 wine. You know, so it really just depends on how much work you wanna put in for how clean of a product, but. Typically, the more experience you get in it, once you've tasted the cleaner product. Then you start getting a little more motivated for it, you know, like having just dry sift out of your trim bin is fantastic. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's just special occasion that you might have that really clean trim bubble hash or something like that. So you might have it for different occasions, but you know, but getting back to the press and flower rosin. So we're gonna load all our flour into these small little 1.5 to 3 inch bags. We'll load that up. They're gonna come in different sizes just based on, you know, how big your press is. So the size bag that you're gonna use is gonna be completely dependent on what size press that you have.
Like your plate size, so how much how many square inches you have to press on. I have a 4x7 press, but I also have a 3x5 press. And so I can use larger bags on my 4x7 than I can on my 3x5. So that's different size bags, different size presses.
Yep, just the quantity that you're working with.
Yeah.
You know, basically, so an entry level press, they might see for $200 to $400, $200 to $500. You know, you're gonna use a 1.5 to 2 inch bag, you know, something you get to a 4 inch by 7 inch press.
Yeah.
That he's talking about, then you're gonna start getting into these 2 to 3 inch bags. So it just depends on what you're pressing, how much you wanna invest in there, but. We'll pack all the flour into these bags regardless of the size.
Yep.
We'll try and put all the small ones on the bottom and create a nice flat layer. The smaller buds are gonna go in first. And that's just gonna create a nice good base. If we had big chunky nuggets on the bottom, it's really hard for other nugs to just fill in and make a nice flat base for it to go and sit on. The key to flower rosin, you know, is really gonna be able to have that flat base, keep even pressure all the way through the bag. So, you know, as you make that nice wide base, you put your smaller nugs in there. I like to hold it with one hand and then you kind of just push it down with your thumb, you know, and just spin the bag around. And then you basically can put in more, you know, add that, push it down. You can use the pre-pressed molds. Personally, I've had the best luck without the pre-pressed molds after doing, you know, pounds and pounds and pounds back to back for flour. But basically, the pre-pressed molds, you can get a circle mold or you can get a rectangular mold, and you can basically, you know, use these molds to just, you know, make a cookie cutter shape out of your flour, pack it all in there, cut out any air bubbles, you know, and have a nice pocket to then just drop into your bag and then press it. Yes.
Is it, when you talk about the different sizes of press, when you go to press, is it better to err on the side of a smaller bag, smaller press, or can you go a little bit, get a little bit bigger of a press, knowing you're gonna scale up? Does that make sense?
Well, I would say that, I mean, my first press was a Dually Tech DP7, you know, and that's like a $400 or $500 press. And then this other one I got out here, the Dad Press 10 ton, was only $700. You know what I mean? So like now I'm kind of kicking myself, like I much rather would have had spent that $700 first.
Buy the bigger
because-
one
You can
and
press
put smaller
smaller
batches in it.
On the big.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, a 6 to 7 ton press is gonna press like,
I don't
you know,
think
an
so.
eighth to a quarter at a time,
Have an
probably.
upgrade later in the future. Yeah.
Try
Oh, and
to
it's-
avoid buying anything twice. If you're gonna go down the bubble hash route. 5 gallon buckets are great, but maybe you wanna wash your whole crop at one time, and maybe it's still 2 pounds, but it's really big now, and so trying to figure out your sizing, well, maybe I'm in a 20 gallon bucket by the end of it. So why would I buy 2 sets of bags, 2 buckets, 2 everything, when I could maybe just step up? And that's kind of the same thing on the press. Buy small bags, you can press 1 nug, you can just throw in a piece of
Yeah,
parchment,
yeah.
you don't need bags, and so, yeah, go oversized if it's reasonable. I mean, something like press, you know, that we don't need anything like that, but Oversize your equipment for your process and it just gives you more working room too. I use a 4x7, like I said, but I'm only ever pressing maybe a 3x5's worth because I just like to have room for my hands. So,
Now, there is some other benefits though. I mean, if you're pressing a smaller amount of material and you're using a big 4x6 inch plate. As you press that material, one thing I like about the smaller presses is that, the plate isn't as big, so you can actually get that rosin off the plates right away.
yeah.
Like my Dually Tech is a really skinny, long plate. And I like that one a lot because it's only 2.5 inches deep. And I'll put a 2-inch bag on there and it's only got a 1/4 inch on each side. As you squish it, it pretty much pushes right to the edge of the front and the back of the plate. And so any rosin that's going to the front or going off the back, it's not touching a hot plate, as soon as it gets off. If it was on a bigger plate, as that puddle of rosin spreads out, it's gonna stay on the heat. You know what I mean?
Burning
So
off
that
your
can,
hands.
so that can affect it. You know what I mean? But I would say like a 6 to 7 ton press, which is probably the most common entry level one. I mean, those you can get away with pressing 10 grams at a time if you want, maybe 8 or 9 grams at a time, comfortably. So, if you're gonna be in that 1/8 to, 1/4 range, a lot of the times you might want to go with the smaller one. If you're gonna press, and feel like you're gonna commit yourself to a 1/4 to maybe 3/4 an ounce at a time, then you'd want to go to the bigger press. So I would say what you're gonna do most commonly, I would get that press because it makes a big difference. And obviously, if you're making edibles and doing things like that, you might be pressing a lot more, versus, so it depends what you're using it for, how much rosin you want to come up with, how much you want to invest in there. But I'll tell you, having the pressure gauge on there, is so huge for somebody new. Like when you're doing the hand press, it really takes a lot. You have to get enough experience to be able to feel the difference between too much and too little. And so just with that being said, you have to waste a lot of material, or you got to burn a lot of material or whatever. So, if you think about that, you want to have a good idea where you want to do with that material. You know what I mean? Because you might be wasting a bunch. It's not all going to be dab approved. So,
And we're unfortunately running a little bit short on time. I want to make sure that we have enough time in the rosin lab. So we're going to sort of wrap up this discussion, but know that these people will be in the lab to answer questions like the rest of the evening. So definitely if you got questions, keep doing that.
yeah, just we'll wrap this up real quick. But yeah, we'll pack it in. You mostly just want to have as you're packing the bag. You'll notice that there might be like little bumps or it might be pushing out on that's exactly what you're looking for. So you want to push in on any bumps kind of protruding out of the bag and just push in on them. That'll spread it out. And you just want to make a nice smooth cylinder, because once you go to put it in the press and you start squeezing, putting pressure on it, that little bulge is where it's going to pop. That little bulge is where it's going to blow up. And that's exactly what you don't want to do. So you want to make sure and just have a nice evenly filled cylinder, and move it around, muscle it around, whatever you got to do to just get that, in a nice cylinder. We're going to start, put it in between the hot plates, let it heat up for 30-45 seconds. I like to kind of set up my parchment and just get all my tools, make sure everything's ready, make sure everything's, dialed in, and then we'll start applying pressure. And the whole thing that I'm thinking about when I'm pressing rosin is just smooth fluidity. If there's one thing, I was thinking about what I want to talk about up here. You can Google any of this stuff, and I figured the most valuable thing that I could give you guys today is just, these things that you really can't pick up in a book, and that's going to be the finesse of everything. And so one thing that, that I really like to do is just, make sure that material's warm and then start cranking down on it and just think about consistency. If you crank hard and fast, that's where it's going to start pushing stuff. Now, if you imagine like pouring out some honey or something like that, if you tried to like pour and stop and start and stop and this and that, like it would be a mess trying to control that honey coming out, right? So I really like to think about keeping a very consistent flow, to everything. And that to me is what's really kind of increased the quality, increased the yield out of it. So as you're pressing, just consistent, steady, just more pressure, and you just keep that going. And then basically you just keep ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. You know what I mean? And like when you're wringing like a towel out, you know, you can get most of the moisture, and that's gonna be most of the rosin dumping out without full force. You know what I mean? So just like if you're wringing a towel, it's just like that. You basically wanna, you know, wring that out and then wring out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I'm not really like pushing down on it and really trying to get it until I'm wringing those last little drops out, and that's all you're trying to get. You know, so
I always tell people it's chasing the flow. So I'm watching the flow of the rosin. And use the gauge to understand your boundaries, your starts and your stops. And then once you transition from that, watch the rosin. It's going to tell you what it wants to do. If you haven't pressed or if you haven't pumped that many times and you went from flowing to not flowing, well, pump it again and keep chasing that flow until as you're pumping, you're essentially seeing no more return. That's generally true in the bubble hash side and the flower side. So chasing the flow is very much the same.
and basically, as you're doing that, and chasing that flow, you'll be watching the rosin or watching your pressure gauge. The pressure gauge is nice because you can actually, you'll put pressure on it, it'll go up, and you can actually, as the pressure drops, that's actually you're watching the rosin escape. You know, so you can just watch that pressure gauge and it'll go up, you'll apply pressure, it goes back, you know, or it goes down and you apply pressure, it goes back up. You know, and then it'll start teetering and it'll just go slower and slower and slower back and forth until you just get to fine. And that's that last drop. And that's where you know you're close. And I like to play it on the air of safety, you know, and if you see that stop running, I like to just get it off the plates quickly right on there. And then what we'll learn in the lab, which you can't really read very well in a book, is basically you're going to read that puck afterwards. So this is crucial to be able to kind of read that puck afterwards. And you're going to look at that used pressed puck and you're going to be able to see exactly how much oil is left around on that ring. And that's going to tell you how much further next time that you can really kind of push it a little bit more and a little bit more. And so the idea is you want to wring that towel out so that you just got that last drop, you know, without, you know, going too fast where it's going to blow out and without, you know, without losing yield. And now if you didn't get all of it out of the bag, you can still use it, put it in some, soak in some MCT oil, or repress it, but it's never going to have the quality that it's going to have that first press. So err on that you know, on that safety, and then you can just analyze that puck afterwards and decide if you want to go a little bit more, a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, make those adjustments, and then you're good to go.
And then that's what we're gonna go see a demo of in just a minute here. So truly, guys, thank you so much. Again, just a reminder of who was up here today. Give them a big round of applause. Awesome. So a couple just very, very quick announcements before we move on. Cannajoy is in the Speakeasy Lounge today. If you're looking to become a grower yourself, they've got something really cool where they're selling individual seed packs. You can sort of make your own bundle. Say you want to grow one seed of this, a seed of this. Well, you can do that. So check that out in the Speakeasy Lounge. We got a book release party. So here at 6 o'clock, we're going to be hanging out. We got food, we got books. Definitely stick around for that if you would like. Spring semester, that schedule drops today. So we've got flyers for that.
What book is dropping?
So we got a processing book. I'm going to talk about it in just 1 second here. Yeah. And then finally, there's a Facebook group that we'll be emailing out to y'all. So be on the lookout for that email in a couple of days with the link to the slides and then also that link to the Facebook group. But yeah, the question about the book. So we've got a processing book actually put together by the Minnesota Cannabis College and by Minnesota Solventless. So John, talking through sort of everything you guys heard today, but in that manual form. So if you want someone to really sit down and say, here are the steps to do it, well, we wrote it down for you. So you can buy that in a book. It talks through the rosin bubble hash side, but also everything from edibles to tinctures, all of that in between. So, oh yeah, everything you can legally do here in Minnesota today, we tried to cover it. So definitely check that out. It's just $15 and then we'll be throwing that party here in about 20 minutes. So go check out that rosin lab. Give these guys just like a minute to get set up. Feel free to try pressing some rosin and yeah, thank you all for coming out.